Wolfpack Nation, we're back here at Tuffy Talk with another episode. This time we're going to be recapping the 23 NC State baseball season. It was one of those up and down seasons, and some things happen good, some things happen bad, and we'll break those down. But on this episode, we got Michael Tracy from our own Tuffy Talk, and then I don't know, like the NC State Pac-9 whisperer. I don't know if that's what we want to call him, but Justin Cooke, we always appreciate you jumping on with us when we talk Pac-9 baseball. How you doing, buddy?
Doing good. Thank you all for having me.
Always, man. It's our pleasure. You are our gold standard go-to source for Pac-9 information. So if we don't know it, we definitely reach out to you. So we're happy to have you. But let's get right into it, and we'll talk the season got off to a really good start. We did really well with our non-conference schedule, having posted a 27-2 record. Was that what it was? I think something like that.
Very
yeah.
Close, yeah.
But overall, the season, 36-21 in the ACC. We finished 13-16, winning 4 series and finishing 5th in the Atlantic. But I guess first off, and I'll throw this to you, Justin, just give me your general thoughts on the season as a whole, right? From last year not making the tournament to this year making the tournament. Would you say success, not success, incomplete? What are your thoughts?
It was a pretty decent success. I mean, it wasn't where I thought the season was going to end, but compared to last season, just to make a regional and play against the teams we had to play in that regional, I'd say we had a pretty good year.
Yeah. What about you, Michael? What are your general thoughts on the season?
Yeah, I mean, it's good to be back in the tournament. I mean, after last year, even though it was a snub, you had to make it back in this year. You couldn't go 2 years in a row missing. So they did that. Like you said, the non-conference, it wasn't the toughest out there, but they took care of business, which it either goes one of two ways. You either have a really hard non-conference where you might lose some, but that'll help you towards the end, or a little bit easier, but you just dominate it, which State did, and that helped them. That was a good start to the year, and especially for the RPI, because that was our biggest factor getting into the tournament.
Absolutely.
But yeah, I mean, like you said, it was up and down all season.
Right. Yeah, you mentioned that RPI, and we kind of, we use that analogy. It's trying to find that sweet spot. And last year you mentioned that snub, and there was a couple of things that kind of were as glaring, and RPI being one of them. So we obviously scheduled to the strength, and we took. I think the approach was pretty smart. You didn't schedule any Power 5 series, right? Mm-hmm. But you took a lot of mid majors that were going to either win their conference or be right at the top. So you got that like we said, that sweet spot. I think in the end we finished 24th in the RPI. And like you said, based off of that with your ACC schedule and a very tough ACC schedule that it was, that was just the right formula to get into the tournament this year. And one of the things that we were kind of worried about come selection Monday was where we're even going to be in. And at the end of the day, we weren't even in the final, last 4 in. Yeah. I mean, we were comfortably in, even with all the upsets that had happened in some of the tournament play.
Yeah. I mean, I was surprised. I thought for sure I think there were 3 or 4 bid stealers between that last Saturday and Sunday conference championships. So I thought with those happening, I thought State was definitely going to fall to the last 4 in. I thought before that happened, I thought we were in, like we said, that RPI was good enough. But then, those bid stealers, you never know. It just depends on the number, and it got close, but obviously it wasn't that close.
Yeah. What about you, Justin?
Yeah, I mean, going into that selection Sunday, I mean, everybody was saying we needed Wake Forest to beat Notre Dame. If Notre Dame would have beat Wake Forest, everybody was saying we were out. So, I mean, and then when you see East Carolina getting beat by Tulane, you're thinking, okay, we're probably going to be one of the last 4 in or out. So, I mean, it was going to come down to the wire, everybody kept saying, but thank goodness it didn't.
Yeah, and I think it's just because we're State fans, right? We naturally assume the worst and hope for the best, and we were our own kind of worst enemy in that regard, where we were just okay, we're good, all right, no problem. We're in the field, and obviously, like you mentioned, Justin, we were in that Columbia region, and then we'll get to that, but I guess I kind of want to just talk about we'll break down the offense and some pitching and the defense. We'll throw some stats out there as we get through this episode, and then obviously we'll talk about the transfers in and out of the program, and that's always the interesting times of the pendulum, if you will. But offensively, I thought we had a pretty productive year, led by James Groover the third. I always love that; it sounds so proper. James Groover the third. He was statistically, he was probably our number one. Now, I was talking off air with Michael. You could have made the case for Cannon Peebles being our most productive offensive player. But just offensively, we finished 10th in the ACC in batting average, which is, obviously towards the bottom, batting 298. But you think like 298, that's a respectable team average. But obviously in the era of, aluminum bats and everything else, you would want that average higher. We finished 9th in runs at 429. I mean, all these stats are based in the ACC, by the way, not nationally.
Yeah.
The runs per game with that average is about right at 7.5 runs. So not bad. I mean, so when you see 7.5 runs, though, you wouldn't expect to lose 21 ball games, right? No. And there was we had a couple of, we had scored like 22 against NJIT. We had a couple of 13s and 14s hung on Florida State and Louisville respectively. So obviously those numbers are going to, help your overall average. But we were 5th in home runs in the ACC, hitting 92, which, that was, if you would have said, 5th, losing Tommy Tanks last year, would you take that number?
Yes.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. With who's coming back and coming in. Yes.
Right. All the uncertainties, right?
Yeah. Well, all the uncertainties. You didn't know who was going to be what and where out in the lap and all that stuff. So, I mean,
right. Because you would think that, with Tommy hitting roughly 25 home runs last year, that's a quarter of your home run total right there. So
yeah,
you look at the lineup and go, okay, who's going to replace 25 home runs? And I thought we did a nice job. Slugging wise, we finished with at 6th in the league at 511. And for the team, though, I thought that's not bad. And then strikeouts, this was the one stat that I was really impressed with. We struck out 390 times, but that was the lowest number in all of the ACC.
Wow.
So I was pretty impressed with that. So good hit the ball ratio. Now, two of the stats that really caught my eye, and I definitely want to break this part down, is the sacrifice flies and sacrifice hits, right? And that goes to situational baseball. So we were tied for 10th with only having 17 sacrifice flies for the whole season. And then we were tied for 9th with sacrifice hits at only 14. So, guys, break that down for me a little bit. Like, I always thought that this was the one thing that we struggled in all year was situational baseball. And before you get to that, I'll even throw this other stat out. We were 11th in the ACC in stolen bases, going 35 for 48. So you throw those three numbers out there, and those, that's that small ball, that situational, moving from station to station. Just kind of, Justin, give me your thoughts first on those three stats.
I think we should have got the green light more to steal more bases, personally. I mean, we should have stole more bases than what we did. I mean, with the speed I thought the team had on the lineup and the bench and everything, and you have Gupton on the bench that could come in pitch run, I thought we should have had more stolen bases than what we did.
Yeah.
On the stolen base part. And sacrifice balls and stuff like that, we didn't bunt the ball like we should have in certain situations. I mean, there's certain situations where you should bunt and you should steal, and they just didn't do it.
Right.
I don't know why they didn't want to, but they just didn't.
Yeah,
it was weird.
Yeah, and you put yourself in a bad situation, right? When you don't put yourself in scoring position, or you don't get that timely hit, with two, because it always felt like we were one hit away in so many games where if we get a hit here, we get a move up on a sacrifice or a stolen base that we can either push a tying run, push a leading run across, or break a game wide open. And I felt like at times we were just missing one thing there. Michael, what do you think there?
Yeah, it did seem like that a lot. When we relied a lot on just letting guys go up there and swing and getting extra base hits. which can be tough because that's, obviously those aren't easy to come by. So like you said, it's like some situational hitting. It was an area that we struggled in.
Yeah. So just breaking down some of those stats from a leader's perspective from the team, Cannon Peebles led the team in batting average at 345, and we'll definitely be talking about him in this episode as we get along. Groover had led the team in hits with 76. Candelaria led the team in doubles with 17. Kalai Harrison had 3 triples for the year, leading that category. And then Groover was your leader in home runs with 13. And then RBIs, Groover and Peebles were tied with 50. And then stolen bases, what we just talked about, we didn't have that many, but Peyton Green was your leader with 9. So your leading stolen base guy only has 9. Long way from the days of Trey Turner, right? And then total bases, Trevor Candelaria, and that's just because that dude was a doubles machine, and he had a lot of he had double digits in home runs, so that dude was just a base machine. Plus, he had some decent amount of walks. And then speaking of walks, Kalai Harrison led the team with walks for 37. And as we're talking, and then I had 697 was our leading slugger, and I believe that was Peebles. It was either Peebles or Groover. I didn't write the name down for that one, so I apologize. But offensively, give me your offensive MVP. Michael, go ahead first.
Yeah, I feel like you gotta go Groover. You talk about situational hitting. That was one guy where you never really worried about it with him. At least that was my perception. Like, you knew he was one that, if you needed a big hit, that he would get you one.
Yeah. I think that's it just every especially late in games. I think he was responsible. I know it was responsible for at least 2 walk-offs. It might have even been 3 because I know it was the UNC
UNCG.
Not UNCG. It was A&T.
No. Oh,
then
that's
he hit,
right. Yeah.
And then I feel like he did the Louisville walk-off, if my memory serves me correctly. And then there might have been one more because I think we had like 5 walk-offs for the year. So we definitely had a little bit of the flair for the dramatics. But Justin, who would have been your offensive MVP?
I would say Gino, but if we're talking about like at bat wise, I would say Kalai Harris because he worked a lot of pitches. So if we're talking about a guy that gets on base and works the count, everything, Kalai Harris.
Yeah, and you speak of Harrison. That was the one knock when he was coming over from A&M last year was his offensive game, right?
Right.
We knew he was a good, steady defender, and obviously we'll talk about that on the defensive side. But he really improved on his batting average. He was over 300, and he was like a 230 hitter last year, I believe, with A&M, something like that, maybe 250.
Like that,
It was very pedestrian to say the least. So. I think, again, Kalai was a very steady guy. He was a guy that got moved around a lot in the order, and he was a 9-hole hitter that wasn't a 9-hole hitter. I thought they did a nice job trying to maximize his at bats, along with having him like 1-2 in the lineup a lot of the season. But so for me, I'll go opposite, and then, like I said, I mentioned Cannon Peebles earlier. He was very either 1, 2, or 3 in pretty much all the offensive statistics, and that was with about 50 at bats less than Groover or Candelaria. He only had 145 at bats, so Groover had over 200, and I believe Candelaria was like right at 200, and they were more of your offensive leaders in a lot of the categories. So for me, and by the way, he's doing that as a true freshman. And so, this is a guy that hadn't seen college pitching coming into it, whereas the other 2 guys that you mentioned had already had a couple years of college experience. So, sometimes making that jump from high school to college can be a little tricky or a little tough. And I thought he did a great job with that. Yeah. So any thoughts on any of the guys that we just mentioned?
I mean, like you were saying, having that Harrison in the 9-hole, he's not, a traditional 9-hole hitter. That's where you hide your worst one. But,
right.
Like he led the team in walks, I think. You mentioned that earlier. So, I mean, having that, having the ability to get a walk from the 9 spot and then have it flip over your lineup to the top of the order again, that's pretty big. So I think that's probably a good underrated pick, I would say.
Before we continue, I want to take a quick second to tell you about our sponsor, Flightland's Jessup Insurance Group, that has your whole world covered, with agents in 5 offices throughout eastern North Carolina to help you decide how much coverage you need, offering policies for home and auto, recreational vehicles, commercial, crop, health, life, and employee benefits. They are able to combine options to find a comprehensive solution that works for you. Flightland's Jessup protects the things you love so you can spend less time worrying and more time enjoying them. Find them on Facebook and Instagram at Flightland's Jessup. You can also visit their webpage at www.flightlandsjessup.com. So please make sure to go and check them out.
Yeah, I mean, he was a guy that had 31 RBIs on the season and batted he batted .313 exactly. So almost 75 points higher than last year, which is a really good jump in that. And he I believe he led the team in getting hit, if I'm not mistaken. It's one of those.
It was either him or Souls.
Yeah, it was either him or Souls. Yeah. They each had 7, so yeah, they were tied. So I'm sorry, Souls had 6, Harrison and Groover had 7. So that's your tie. So you had a couple guys that got hit a couple times, but I thought, again, it was a team that put up 7.5 runs, and when we talked about it, losing 21 games off of that, and you're trying to figure out, well, how do you lose, 21 games? We lost a lot of 1-2 run games, and in those games we just didn't have the run production. And I felt like all season long you had guys in the lineup that got hot at times, right? I remember linking back, you had Chase Nixon's series in Boston College where he was just tearing it up. And then there was, Peyton Green had a great non-conference, and then when he got to conference ball, it for whatever reason, it didn't work out for him. And then same can be said for Carter Trice. Carter Trice had a nice, early start to his season, and then for whatever reason, he got into a slump, and then you didn't see him at all, really, except for the situational, pinch hit, defensive substitution in the later innings. I guess kind of just give me your thoughts, Justin, about the, we try to stay positive here, but just maybe some of the players that you maybe thought you would get a little bit more from this year that just didn't give you what you were looking for.
Yeah, I agree about the Carter Trice situation. I mean, he had a good fall, good non-conference, and then just when it came to ACC play, he was just struggling. Same thing like we just said with Peyton Green. Peyton Green had a good beginning this season, then he struggled down the stretch. I mean, and then you have Chase Nixon in the lineup, and then he does good against Wake Forest, and after that, you take him out of the lineup for some reason.
Yeah.
I mean, and then you have some guys playing through injuries like Souls for a while at the beginning of the year. And then he comes back, he's still not 100%, but he still had a pretty good year, I thought, considering.
Yeah.
Everything.
You mentioned that. He missed it was probably 6 weeks, I would say, because I think
something like that.
Yeah, because he got injured pretty much the first game of the season, second game of the season, and then he kind of gutted it out a little bit, and then ended up, going to the. And there's not an IL, but I mean that's essentially what it is. But you mentioned players that get hot and then they go to the bench. Like I remember Cannon. I want to say. I know it was a Sunday game. I believe it was. In fact, it was the Meet the Pack game. Whoever we played that day, I don't remember who it was.
Was it
Louisville
that day? Yeah.
Yeah, because we lost to them that last game.
Yeah, the last game, the Meet the Pack day, we lost.
Yeah, so that Meet the Pack day, Cannon Peebles has got the flu, doesn't play, and then he comes back and he sits on the bench for 2 or 3 weeks, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So things like that for the season kind of made me just, and I don't know if I want to quote unquote question the coaching staff, but I do notice, and we'll mention it on the pitching side as well, but you see these players and they'll struggle for a game or two, and then they get the pull, and you don't see them for weeks.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe don't even see them the rest of the season.
Mm-hmm.
And I get it. It's a kind of a sprint, right, with a 60-ish game season.
Yeah.
And coaches can't really afford to have guys figuring it out in games,
later
because
down
before
the
you
stretch,
right. And I don't know. Give me your thoughts, Michael, on some of these guys, getting pulled and then just kind of getting buried in the depth chart.
Yeah, it was tough. I mean, you had a lot of outfielders and not enough infielders. It almost seemed like, and Carter Trice, I'm surprised they didn't play him more in the infield, either at second or short when Peyton Green was struggling.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, like you said, it's just tough to get some consistency, when you're not playing for weeks at a time.
Yeah, that's a great point. I guess a couple points I want to kind of peel back. The one thing you mentioned there was the outfielders, and we had a ton of outfielders, and they were all quality players. And that, it actually helped us at the beginning of the season when you had injuries to like the Noah Souls that you mentioned, Justin, and then there was a point in time where Trevor Candelaria was injured.
Yep.
And you had your Parker Nolans that could come in. You had your Chase Nixons that could come in and fill in, and Will Marcy had a little bit of time out there. Yep. And these guys, and we've talked about it a ton on Tuffy Talk. Baseball is just a weird game where you get hot and you see beach balls, and then you struggle for a couple of days. You lose your swing a little hitch or a little something in your swing. Maybe you're just not seeing the ball as well. Maybe you're just a little tired, like any number of things. And yeah, you're on the bench for 2 or 3 weeks, and then you get put back in the lineup. And what do you expect? We get one pitch hit, and you get one chance to prove yourself to get back in the lineup. And if you don't succeed, you're back to the back of the bench. And then I think some of that just messes with your confidence too, right? Like if you're not getting in there, if you're struggling a little bit, then you start pressing, and things start. It's a little harder for you to be successful in that.
Right. And you overthink a little bit too, like if I'm struggling, am I going to be back out there? Am I going to be on the bench? All that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Like Marcy was doing good at some times, and then you put him on the bench, then you have him pitch hit, and certain, not just Marcy, but some other players too.
Sure.
We're struggling when that stuff happened. So
yeah, and you have guys like Dominic Palali who played a big role in the team last year and didn't even see the field except for the one sacrifice fly that he had against Florida State to win it in extra innings. That was his one shining moment of the season. And this is a guy that
pitch hit. Everything else was pitch hit for him this year, or defense substitutions.
Right. This is Dominic Palali had 19 at bats all season. He had that probably in the first series of the season last year, or at least within the first 2 series.
Yeah.
So.
Like that.
But yeah, and then you mentioned, Michael, that is something that had been said all year is you had a ton of outfielders. Like you probably had 10 outfielders, and there's a little hyperbole there, but she probably had 6 or 7 easily. And then when you mentioned, the Peyton Green injury, he was hurt there for a little bit, and then he struggled defensively. There was no one really to, you saw these other guys get sat when they were on a little bit on the struggle bus, but Peyton Green never really got that same treatment.
Yeah. And I don't think that was like special treatment towards Peyton Green. I think it was just, you didn't have anybody to replace him with, or I think you did. You could have tried Carter Trice there, but they didn't go for it.
Right.
Or you could have tried Barkett there. Barkett or Hebner.
Hebner, right? Because he had
Hebner. He did play at the end.
Yeah, at the end of the years when they started playing him a little bit more.
And he had some nice moments too.
Yeah.
And we'll definitely talk about him in the probably part 2 of this episode about the future of Pac-9. But it's frustrating because you see all this talent and the numbers bear it out that this should have been a more successful team. And I don't understand some of the things. The one thing too, and I guess we'll start talking about pitching a little bit, and then we'll wrap up this episode here in just a minute or two. But jumping to the pitching side of the house, because I think this is where we're going to get into a little bit of the discussion. ERA wise, we were 6th in the ACC at 442. So again, if you go to your ERA at 442 and you're scoring 7.5 runs a game, your win-loss record, in theory, seems like it should be better, right?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So again, that was 6, and the leader for the team. So all my pitching stats, all my leaders, I based you had to pitch at least 10 innings. So that's the preference here. But your ERA leader was Justin Lawson with 327. And then we were 4th in earned runs, which I thought was pretty good, giving up the 4th least amount of earned runs in 248. Again, our pitching was pretty good, and then we were 5th in 210 walks for the season. So again, not bad. And then we gave up the least amount of home runs of all the ACC pitching staffs. We gave up 56 for the year. So again, yeah. And 10 of those were by Highfield and Baker Nelson. So if you take away those 20, you're at 36. So 2 pitchers, were almost half of your home runs that were given up. And then ERA, we were 8th in the league, but I'm sorry, not ERA, average against. Opponents only batted 255 against us. And again, that's not bad at all when you break it down. And so Sam Highfield led the way with 6 wins on the season. Appearances were tied with Justin Lawson and Baker Nelson at 27 each. And remember that stat, 27 appearances each by those two. Okay, and we'll come back to that because there's a point I want to make. And then innings pitched was Matt Willitson at 81. And then your your average against Dominic Fritton, opponents batted 211 against him. So pretty good pitching numbers as a whole. Kind of give me your thoughts, Justin, on the pitching staff, because I want to preface this. Let's talk starting pitching and bullpen, because there's a distinct difference between the two when you break down the pitching staff. So give me your thoughts on the starting staff first, Justin.
On the starting staff, Whitaker had up and down, but when he was on, he was on. You could tell when he was on. With that game face, you could tell he was on.
Like, he was your Friday starter for most of the
Friday
season.
Guy. Matt, you could tell when he was on. And then, Sam, everybody keeps forgetting Sam and Matt were coming off injuries last year. Everybody keeps forgetting that. So,
So real quick, for anyone that didn't know, Matt had a hip injury that he was rehabbing, coming back from, and then Sam with his back injury. So go ahead, Justin.
So, a lot of people don't realize they were still coming back from it. And you could tell that sometimes they were still recovering from that certain times when they were out there. You could tell.
Yeah.
And then you had Lawson, like we mentioned. Lawson, he was basically some of his bullpen outs were sort of like starts. Mm-hmm. And then Dom Friend, you had him start for like 4 innings, and then later down the year, you moved him to the bullpen.
Right.
Just like Baker Nelson, like you mentioned earlier. You had him start some games, and then you had him come out of the bullpen later on the year.
Yep.
But, there were some guys that I thought should have more innings than what they did on the pitching side.
Yep. And we'll break some of that down here in a second. But go ahead, Michael. Give me your thoughts on both on the starting pitching and the bullpen.
Yeah, obviously Whitaker and Wilton were solid all season. And then that I guess the Sunday starter kind of flip-flopped between Fritton early in the year and then Highfield, which, it's tough because, like Justin was saying, Highfield obviously never was really fully 100% recovered from the injury, so it's tough to judge it too much because Fritton was very good as a starter and struggled a little bit when they moved him to the bullpen. But again, Highfield's he was your rock during the College World Series a couple of years ago. So you wanted him to get back into that starter role. It just never really came together. And then bullpen, we had some solid guys, but it felt like there were more guys that could have been used kind of throughout the season.
And that goes to the point where I wanted to make about appearances. Yeah. Lawson and Nelson were your 2 leaders at 27, and those are 2 of your bullpen guys. Well, Baker, like Justin said, Baker was kind of one of those. He made a
midweek,
made several midweek starts, and we'll talk about the midweek starter here in a second. For me, the starting pitching I thought was really good all year for the most part. Obviously you're going to have your one-offs, and those things happen. but you gave your offense a chance to win ball games. And I thought when we lost games, and this is going to sound kind of weird, we didn't lose many games in the beginning of the game, if that makes sense, right? Like your starters put you in a position to win ball games, and it seemed like when we lost ball games, it was one of two things: either our bullpen just didn't hold their water, or the defense made a crucial error at some point in the game, and that's how we lost our games. And again, I think that bears out to what we were just talking about a few minutes ago, where your team ERA is 4.42 and you score 7.5 runs, right? Just something has to give, and I think those are the two reasons why you ended up seeing 21 losses on the season. But I agree with you. At the beginning of the season, Dom Frinton was untouchable. He was leading the ACC in ERA with just 1 and some change, and then he kind of creeped over 2. And then when you saw his ERA quote unquote bloom, and it wasn't even that bad of an ERA, I think he ended up with 3.49 or something like that. It wasn't a bad ERA, but it did kind of bloom at the end when he went to the bullpen. Again, I don't think all of that's on him. Some of those errors that didn't go down as errors, but they're like mental errors, right? You're not fielding your position, and you're giving. And when you go back and talk about the ACC was part of the number 2 conference in the country. When you're giving good quality opponents extra at bats, whether it's a walk, whether it's an error, whether it's just a mental misplay in the field, you're going to get taken advantage of, and it's going to get exposed. And I thought that happened way more than it should have over the season. And that's frustrating because, as a pitcher, because again, when you make one of those mistakes, that's 8 more pitches, 15 more pitches, 20 more pitches that a pitcher has to put on that they don't get to now pitch into the 5th or 6th. And now you have to tax that bullpen that you only have 4 or 5 guys that you trust. And so it shrinks your window for success and your margin of error. It makes it that much tighter. So kind of give me your guys' thoughts on my analysis there.
Yeah, the defense, at the beginning of the year when we played Miami, the first 2 Miami games, defense basically lost us that series. Point blank simple. We came back, tied it up at 9, and then we all know what happened after the first game, later on in the game. And then when you play Notre Dame, actually our base running, the first Notre Dame game, is what cost us that series. There were certain situations where it was either our defense, our base running, or the way we handled the pitching.
Yeah.
Everything just in general, it was just bad for not what you need to succeed and have, and that's how we lost those games because, like I said, base running was bad at certain times, our defense was bad at certain times, and just everything at times.
Yeah. And that's a good point I think you made, that about the defense being, it's not just that, the face value of an error,
right?
Letting a run score. That's if that's 10, 15 more pitches, your pitcher has to throw that inning. That could be a whole nother inning. You have to take him out earlier. So interesting.
Yeah. So, all right, Wolfpack Nation. I think we're going to pause there for episode 1, our first part of our season breakdown or review for Pac-9 2023 season. If you like this episode and you want to see more, then go ahead and subscribe to Tuffy Talk on YouTube, and make sure you give your thumbs up on the videos and let us know that we're doing hopefully a good job and that you're getting some entertainment value out of these. And if you are getting that entertainment value, make sure you hit that button or that bell to get all of our notifications when we drop episodes like Pac-9 or any of our episodes, and then also when we go live on our Monday night live stream. So Justin, thanks for joining us on this episode, and make sure you guys come back for part 2. And as always, go Pack.